Hey everybody, it's August 31st today, and so I thought that it was a good time to just do an overview of September 2020. And in general, I want to start out by saying Mercury is like flying right now. Mercury's kind of the center of attention right now for a couple of reasons because it's in Virgo, which it rules and is exalted in. But also, it's going about as fast as it ever does right now. It's going about 2 degrees a day. So what that means is we're all in uncharted territory. There's new things happening in our lives, new themes, new challenges, new obstacles. Yeah, just new stuff happening, and that's a pretty tangible pattern. So that should be something that you relate to. Yeah, and this applies to all of September. Mercury constantly does this. It speeds up for like a month or two, and then it slows down and retrogrades, and it speeds up again. So right now we're on the really fast portion of Mercury's orbit. Other than that, that fits into a larger pattern where all the inner planets right now are direct, and that's only for about the first week of September because September, I'm looking at my calendar up here. September 9th, Mars does turn retrograde, so Mars is already slowing down. But the Sun and Moon are always direct, and then right now, there's Mercury, Venus, and temporarily Mars all direct. So, again, what that means is it's kind of like Mercury, where the inner planets affect us more on an individual level, more of our personal lives. So that means new stuff happening in our personal lives. However, once you get past Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are all retrograde right now. And so when you get farther out from the sun, the planets tend to become more abstract and more long term, more big picture, and they affect us more societally and as a collective. So, as a society, as a collective, or in historical terms, there's not as much happening right now. And I'm just talking about September because before August, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and after September, there's going to be more stuff happening. But just for September, there's not as much happening politically, historically, as a society, etc. Or if there is stuff happening, it's just a continuation of what's already been happening. So, I mean, just all the big stuff happening in America right now, Black Lives Matter, the protests, coronavirus, the politics, all of it's just been stuff that's already been happening. So it's not really new. That's because these planets are retrograde, so the focus is more internalized, it's more serious, it's more backward or focused on the past, stuff like that. Yeah, so again, just to reiterate, most of the action is going to be experienced in our personal lives rather than as a collective or as a society for this month. Okay, so just to start out, September 1st, there's actually a full moon, and it's either September 1st or September 2nd, depending on where you are. I have the chart for the full moon here for the West Coast. It's right at almost 11 p.m. exactly. And there's also Sun, well, Venus. Okay, let me just say this. So the full moon is at 10 degrees Pisces. It's not really conjunct Neptune, but it's close enough to have an impact, especially because it's in Pisces, which Neptune rules. And so, this is kind of the Pisces full moon is always kind of a disorienting one, as you might expect. It's could be mentally unstabilizing. The plus sides of it is that you could get lost in fantasy. You could have a more vivid imagination. It could be good for being creative, for writing or any kind of art, really. Um, yeah, as long as you know that you're partaking in a fantasy, because if you don't, it could make you confused or disoriented. It could also make you a little bit mentally unstable because both Pisces and Virgo have to do with physical health and mental health. So it could affect you. It could affect people negatively with their mental health or physical health. But again, this is the moon, so it's a quick aspect. It really just applies to the 1st or 2nd of September. And yeah, I mean, both Virgo and Pisces can be a little bit neurotic or a little bit crazy at times. So this kind of full moons are just crazy in general too. So this kind of can bring that out. Although it can be very tranquil too, like it has that potential as well. Both Virgo and Pisces are nature lovers, so just getting out in nature and like meditating or something would be really good for that aspect. And it's not aspecting any planet except for Uranus, which is Uranus is sextiling the moon and trining the sun, so it's in harmony with this full moon. So that could take the fantasy aspect of it and just make it a little bit more unpredictable. So generally, that would be a good thing because of the trine and the sextile, but it could be disorienting or confusing, especially if you aren't the type of person that likes surprises. Because it's just a weird, funky aspect. It's good for just getting weird, getting kind of out there, um, doing something unexpected or unusual. I guess it's just that kind of aspect. We also have Venus opposing Saturn exact on the first. So I mean, I predicted that there'd be volatility in the stock market, but generally it seems good right now. So, um, so, um, but that could just make it. That could just put some strain on our emotional comforts or feeling secure emotionally right now, because Venus in Cancer is very tender, very emotional, very. It gets pleasure from its relationships with other people. It's a very feminine aspect. So that opposing Saturn and Capricorn, there's just an obvious clash there because Saturn and Capricorn is more masculine or more stern, more authoritative. So it's kind of this disconnect between what we want, like emotionally, and what we actually need to do, like physically in the world, something like that. Yeah, so there could be some tense situations regarding our resources, our money, our time, our pleasure, whatever we're getting pleasure out of. Yeah. Okay, and then going forward, we've just got lots of aspects with Mercury after that. So, Mercury trine Saturn, Mercury square the nodes. So we're just at a crossroads where Mercury's halfway between the nodes. So, and again, Mercury's going so fast that all these aspects only affect you for either just a day or for hours, or affect us, I should say. So this could just be like a kind of crossroads, especially because it's opposing Neptune and the Moon. Not exactly, but close enough. Yeah, so there's just a scattered energy. You get that whenever you're combining multiple mutable signs. There's just a lot of frenetic scattered energy where you might be pulled different directions, especially if you have planets in mutable signs, especially around 25 degrees. September 2nd, you'll just feel kind of scattered, and this could actually be discomforting but beneficial in the long run because it steers you on the right track. Like maybe you're getting slightly off track in life and you are uncomfortable and you realize it and you get back on track. And this happens in a very quick matter of time because, again, it just applies to September 2nd. Yeah, okay. And that's pretty much it for Wednesday the 2nd. Friday or Thursday the 3rd, Mercury sextile Venus, so that's nice. Mercury Venus aspects are always nice. Venus square Mars, and that's actually nice too because Venus and Mars like to aspect each other. Even when it's a tense aspect, it's usually kind of sexy and it's just a more gritty kind of flirtation or a gritty kind of desire. So it's there's something like off kilter about it, but it can usually be fun anyway, if that makes sense. That's Thursday the 3rd. And Venus is going pretty fast too, I think, right? Yeah, about a degree a day, so it's cruising. Yeah, a little bit over a degree a day, actually. So this is kind of brief too. It just applies to Thursday the 3rd, plus or minus, give or take a day. And then we've also got Mercury quincunx Mars. So, all three of the inner planets are at 27 degrees of different signs, basically. I mean, the quincunx isn't a major aspect, especially because Mercury's going so fast. You'll only feel that if you have a planet at 27 degrees Aries or 27 degrees Virgo. And it really depends on your exact astrology even then, so I can't really predict it very well. But yeah, there's just a harmony between Mercury and Venus, so good communications in relationships and good, could just be like Mercury and Venus together are very flirtatious, chatty. They enjoy good conversations, good experiences, and enjoying other people, stuff like that. Very social aspect. So yeah, so you could utilize that, and and I guess it's kind of obvious how you could utilize that. And then again, like I said, the Venus square Mars is just kind of a more gritty or more off kilter attraction of sorts. Um, then on Friday, let's see. Well, okay, so again, depending on where you are, either Friday or Saturday. Basically, over the weekend, Mercury and Venus change signs. So by Sunday, Mercury will be in Libra and Venus will be in Leo. And I actually like this, even though Mercury leaves its sign of exaltation and its sign of domicile. It's pretty content in Libra. Libra is an intellectual sign. It's an Aries sign. Mercury does well in air signs. Um, Mercury likes to be intellectual, so that's still a good placement. And then Venus and Leo is a really fun energy, and especially since the two of them are sextiling, they're in a harmonious aspect. So yeah, I think things will just get lighter there with the air and the fire. Venus and Cancer can be very sentimental, and but it's kind of a soggy aspect. It's just so emotional sometimes that it's not the most fun energy to experience when you're going through it. So Venus going into Leo is a lot more fun. It's more of a party energy, especially sextiling Mercury, which is an air sign, so it's more chatty, more sociable, wants to, experience people, stuff like that, experience relationships. Yeah, so I really like that. Yeah, and there's no aspects for the whole weekend. There's no aspects the next couple of days. The next time, I guess I should say, the moon is waning, so it's leaving the full moon. It's um, going to be a quarter moon soon, later in the week. So the next thing is the 8th. Sun trine Jupiter. Yep. Um, yeah, so that's nice. I mean, you have two. The Sun and Jupiter are both benefic, so they both rule abundance and vitality. You also have the Sun beginning to oppose Neptune, which will actually be exact on the 10th. Um, but it's kind of part of that in a way, because Neptune and Jupiter are beginning to sextile each other, and then the Sun is opposing Neptune and trine Jupiter. Um, yeah, I'll talk about Sun opposed Neptune in a second, but the Sun trine Jupiter is just good for abundance, good, probably good for the economy. Actually, they're both in Earth signs, which rule physical commodities, money, resources, and they're both benefics, and they're both trining each other. So yeah, so it's a good day to manage your resources, to get organized, to work hard or work on a new project or something. There's just general positivity. There's abundance and good good energy in those areas. In the areas of, again, like physical objects, physical resources, time, money, stuff like that. The other thing on the 8th is Mars goes retrograde. So by the 9th, it's retrograde, and it's at the very end of Aries. So that's kind of an intense part of the chart. Um, so I mean, in general, since especially because Mars and Chiron are in Aries, so they're both. I mean, you've got a lot of protests this year, and it's easy to see why. Because with Chiron and Aries all year, all of our wounds are like on full display. So emotionally, people are very defensive or outspoken about their perceived wounds or their traumas. So they're very, very vocal, very, um, like with the protests. And then you got Mars there, so that's just adding fuel to the fire there. People wanting to fight for themselves in whatever way they see that they need to do that. Because it varies per individual, but Mars in Aries is in domicile, so it's very strong. People are fiery, people are defensive, people are offensive, people are more willing to fight, and that can be good and bad. It just depends. So with Mars turning retrograde, that means that becomes more internalized and more. Um, so a lot of times before a planet goes retrograde, it means that planet is flying through new territory, and there's so much new stuff happening that there's not enough integration. So people may have been fighting for what they thought were their personal liberties, but they may have done so in an incorrect way. They may have been confused, or there may have just been stuff happening that they didn't fully integrate regarding that fire, that fighting for themselves and such. Um, So now, as Mars goes retrograde, there's more of a processing of what happened over the past couple months. Was this all accurate? What was good about it? What wasn't good about it? And that could be just experienced by everyone. It's not just protest, but maybe we were too, what's the word? Maybe too impulsive in certain areas where, we need to think about the actions that we took over the past month or two, or maybe we were overly defensive, or maybe we weren't defensive enough. But generally, Mars in Aries, like I said, is gets people more worked up. So, just kind of a processing of that aspect for the past month or two. Yeah. Okay. And then we've got the quarter moon right after that on the, or it might be, well, it looks like late September 9th. And again, plus or minus a day depending on where you are with any aspect because of the time zones. But yeah, so we got a third quarter moon. This is kind of interesting because it's directly involved with Neptune. Neptune's only, I could go to the exact chart. That's pretty exact right there. There. Okay, so Sun at 18 degrees Virgo, Moon at 18 degrees Gemini, so that's a third quarter moon. Both in mercurial signs, which is interesting, but then Neptune is opposing the Sun and squaring the Moon with an orb of only 1 degree, so it's pretty exact. So again, that kind of incorporates something that I touched on, but we'll explain further, which is the opposition between Virgo and Pisces. So again, mentally unstabilizing or destabilizing. Because you're trying to combine physical mutability with emotional or spiritual mutability. So mental health with emotional health, or I mean emotional health with physical health. Combining the physical with the non-physical in terms of health or organization or reflection, stuff like that. So yeah, so again, activities that are good for that are things where you can kind of zone out or meditate, like art, or could just even be sports, especially if it's an individual sport, like jogging or something. Jogging's not a sport, but like I don't know, or golfing or something where you can kind of just zone out, or whatever it is for you. Everybody has something, whether it's meditating, reading, writing, some kind of art, or getting creative, getting just zoned out. Yeah, any kind of sport where you're like trying to beat your own score, where you can just, get in the zone or what have you. That's good for combining Virgo with Pisces. So that would be good for this day. And especially doing something physical might help you from becoming mentally or emotionally unstable, because that's a pattern that comes up with these oppositions. And then for this, that's just more true because you're combining Moon and Gemini, which is very scattered, very frenetic. It could also get kind of crazy mentally. It's more of a mental, like a manic energy. So yeah, just a lot going on. Lots of like different situations, a lot of scattered energy because again, you're combining multiple mutable signs. And the third quarter moon is just, it's a crisis in consciousness which we experience once a month, and it's just wrapping up the lunar cycle. So it's entering the last week of the lunar cycle, which means that there's shifts basically for the month in terms of the lunar cycle. The third quarter moon is the last adjustments you need to make before the lunar cycle ends. So there's these sort of changes. There's this restless energy, this energy that's needed, this energy that we feel in order to sort of make these adjustments and changes in our lives. And again, this is a small picture thing because it happens once a month. But yeah, so September 10th, quarter moon, so just might feel restless, might feel scattered. So again, I would suggest reading, writing, creative activities, time in nature, stuff like that. Going forward, the exact opposition between the Sun and Neptune happens the next day, which is on September 11th. So that's kind of interesting. So it could be mentally destabilizing. Again, I kind of just explained that just for the day before. So that really applies to those 2 days. Let's see. We've also got Jupiter is actually going to go direct at 17 degrees Capricorn. There we go. And then Mercury makes a quincunx to Uranus, which is really, Mercury's going so fast, and quincunx isn't a major aspect, so I'm not even really going to touch on that. I don't think it matters that much. Sun trines Pluto. So, I mean, for me personally, when aspects like this happen, I think it's a good time to look at your savings, because Pluto is kind of a hoarding, or it has to do with uh, your your financial resources, or your bank account. Like banks are kind of a Pluto thing, or precious metals. Pluto rules precious metals, stocks, bank accounts, stuff like that. And especially with the Sun in Virgo, which has to do with organizing and managing money and being efficient and stuff like that. It just looks like a good day to just kind of just look over your savings and your finances, not because you have to or because there's a crisis there necessarily, because this looks like a positive aspect, but just in order to strategize and look into the future. And if you don't have any savings, maybe just look at that and think like, okay, how do I save more, or should I make a change there, or should I reorient myself there in some way, stuff like that. But yeah, that really to me suggests money stuff in general. And again, it's not like cash. It's not like disposable cash. It's like large investments, debts, stocks, bank accounts, stuff like that. Um, yeah, and it's again, I just want to stress it's a trine, so it's more of a positive aspect. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's just good to take advantage of that. Where am I? Okay, Venus square Uranus. Oh yeah, right there. So the next day, September 15th, we got Venus square Uranus in fixed signs: Venus in Leo, Uranus in Taurus. So, hmm, Venus, and then let me just look at everything. Mercury's halfway through Libra at this point. The Sun is leaving the opposition with Neptune, and then you've also got Mars square Saturn, and both of them are retrograde now. So Venus has left the opposition with Saturn, so that takes a lot of the tension off. So I think at this point, it's actually more easy to enjoy ourselves than at the beginning of the month, because Venus is in a happier sign. It's in a more positive, more energetic sign. Leo likes enjoying pleasurable activities and gifts and physical activities, and that would be pleasurable and stuff like that. So yeah, it actually looks good that Venus is generally an aspected. The square with Uranus though says that there needs to be a change in that area. So like there could be a shift in consciousness regarding your pride or your ego. Maybe especially if you have planets that are aspecting this, that are 10 degrees of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. Maybe you've been too full of yourself, or maybe you've had more of an inferiority complex where your ego needs a little bit of adjustment, because Uranus wants to shift things, wants to change things, and then Venus is in Leo, the sign of ego and self-worth, self-expression. So maybe you need to be more expressive, maybe you need to like tone it down a little bit. It could be either way. um that's the main thing that I see, because both Uranus is kind of about self-expression and individuality too, but it wants to change. It wants a breakthrough. It wants a sudden shift. So that's the main thing I see: a shift in your self-expression, your ego, stuff like that. And again, that affects everyone, but especially if you have planets in fixed signs, especially at 10 degrees of fixed signs. Okay, where am I? I keep losing myself. And then we got the Sun squaring the nodes the next day, September 16th. Sun squares the nodes, so we're at the exact midpoint now between the eclipse seasons. So there could just be some adjustments and changes, nothing extreme like we experienced more so in June, and like we will experience in November. Um, Sagittarius season, because the nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius. So Gemini season, which is like June this year, there was a bunch of shifts and changes, especially if you have planets in mutable signs. And then next November, once we get into Sagittarius, then we'll experience a bunch of shifts and changes as well. But right now it's just the midpoint in between the two, so there's just adjustments or there could be shifts in those areas. So think about what changed for you in June or late May. Did you experience any change, or was there not so much change? Because if you don't have any planets aspecting this, you wouldn't feel it as much. But if you did experience a shift, there will likely be some smaller changes in that same area around September 16th when the sun has a midpoint there. And then there's going to be more changes probably in the same area 3 months later when we're in the middle of Sagittarius season. Yeah, that pretty much covers it, I think. And that's the only aspect for that day. But the moon is catching up to the sun, so we're about to have a new moon. Let's see here. Okay, so the new moon is, my calendar says it's 25 degrees Virgo. Yeah, it's like the very beginning of the 20, not the 25th degree, but 25 degrees Virgo. Let me just make sure. Okay, I just want to make sure the camera's set up right. Okay, so we got the Virgo new moon, and I've said this before, but that kind of, it makes it feel more like whatever sign it's in. So it'll feel more like fall, even though September isn't fall technically. It concludes summer, and so thereby, it implies fall basically. It isn't fall, but it implies fall, or it's reminiscent of fall because it's getting us toward that area. And by the first day of fall, it already feels completely like that season. Generally speaking, that's how these phases work. So yeah, so that could influence even your weather depending on where you are. Feeling like cooler temperatures, feeling more like fall, etc. But also just in the themes, more Virgo stuff, more Virgo themes after that. So organization, learning, working, physical work, or preparing, planning, managing, analyzing, stuff like that. It's very mental, very cerebral energy, but it's more centered on the physical. So that's why it ends up being mentally organizing your surroundings or organizing your resources, stuff like that. General Virgo stuff gets stronger after the 17th of September. Let's see here. Okay, and that doesn't make sense. Mercury. Oh yeah, it does. Okay. Okay, so there's a couple aspects. Let's see, how should I do this? Well, first of all, the new moon is at 25 degrees Virgo, like I said, and it's trining Saturn to the degree. So I actually like this a lot. This is, it reminds me of the sun trining Pluto, which happened a couple days before this, but because you've got, a trine between the sun and the moon in this case with an outer planet in Capricorn. So it has to do with our responsibilities, and it's kind of a more stoic energy, but it's positive because you get the new moon, which is kind of a peaceful time, but it's a time of renewal. It's revitalizing, re-energizing, where it's an ending and then a beginning. So it's basically the most quiet period of the lunar cycle in general. But it's trining Saturn, so there could be a new beginning involving your resources, because both Virgo and Capricorn, as well as Saturn, are about managing your resources, your time, energy, money, etc. Whatever your resources are for you. I always say time, energy, and money, but it could be different things for you, or those things could look different depending on your individual situation. But it just looks like a time to get a hold of those things. And again, it's not a crisis. It looks like a very positive aspect. It looks like a time where managing those things could be really easy, and you could make some gains in those areas. Looking at your work situation, looking at your income, looking at your savings, stuff like that. Because Pluto has to do with, large amounts of money like that too. But so does Saturn. It's kind of a similar theme, especially in Capricorn. It's all about planning for the future. It could just have to do with your goals too. So where are you going in life? Do you feel fulfilled? Are you doing what you wanted to do in life? And if not, it's just a good time to to look at those things and kind of re-strategize. I just like it because it looks like a really easy, positive time to be productive with some of these things that are typically heavier and that maybe we don't like to think about, but it just looks like a really easy time to deal with those, to plan and strategize, manage our money, time, energy, etc. Yeah, and again, I think I touched on this, but there could be a new beginning in that area. So a new form of income or a new way to manage your money, a new bank account or a new investment or a new, even could be a new debt, but hopefully it's a positive debt, like a restructuring of debts or something like that. Um, something a new something like that, new way to manage your resources or a new goal in life maybe. Again, especially if you have planets in earth signs for this one, so especially 25 degrees of Capricorn, Virgo, or Taurus, this will just be a really positive time for you in relation to all the stuff I just said. Yeah, so it looks like a nice new moon. It's not. It's kind of far enough from the opposition with Neptune too that it's. I mean, maybe there's like a little bit of disorientation vibes, but generally it looks like a pretty grounded, positive energy on the 17th. And there's not a whole lot right after that. The 18th, or wait, Mercury. Oh, I forgot to mention Mercury is also square Jupiter on that same day on September 17th. The reason why I forgot to mention it is because it's not aspecting the new moon, but on the side you do have that aspect, and even though Mercury and Jupiter are at odds, they typically get along pretty well even when they're at odds because they're both open-minded and expansive energies, and they both both their signs of domicile are square naturally, so they're kind of used to that. So what that means for you is, let's see. So it's a good time to learn about new concepts, new ideas, especially in your social relationships or in your career or the world. And this affects everyone differently depending on where it is, but it looks like people would be thinking about how they come across. Like Libra and Capricorn are both very strategic, very socially strategic signs. So I wouldn't say manipulative, but they're just very aware of how they come across with people. They're both kind of almost good signs for politicians because of that, because they want to make sure that they come across in a respectful way, or whatever it is that they want in the particular situation. Especially Capricorn is very dignified, and Libra can be like that too, but Libra is more versatile, so it depends more on the situation. But both those energies, Mercury and Jupiter, are both about learning and expanding, but they're in signs which are, I think, the main thread that links them is this social strategizing, or because both are cardinal, both are projecting their own will or their own idea or their own perspective onto things, just in slightly different ways, if that makes sense. Or just it could just be more goal oriented energies, kind of like with the new moon happening on that same day. Because again, both are thinking about the future, so both are kind of about planning and strategizing to some extent. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of trouble with that one, but that's kind of what I see in general. Mercury, in general, people would be thinking about their social relationships, thinking about maybe how their social relationships do or do not mesh with their plans and goals for the future, or with where they want to be in society, stuff like that. I don't know, that's one we go with. And then we've got Mercury quincunx Neptune and Mercury quincunx Mars. And again, those aren't super. Or sorry, Sun quincunx Mars. Yeah. And those aren't super big aspects. I mean, quincunxes are just barely worth mentioning. I mean, sometimes I just write them down just in case they are aspecting something, but I mean, they're not. usually worth mentioning, I guess. Got the moon crossing Mercury, so September 19th, it'll be very easy to be expressive because the moon and Mercury are aligned. So that means that people's emotions and their thoughts are kind of lined up. They're in agreement. So it's very easy to be communicative, to be social because it's in Libra, which is a social sign. So it's easy to communicate effectively, either in a strategic way or just in a positive, fun way, whatever the case may be. Having productive or just fun social interactions and relationships. Yeah, that's the main thing I see. And it is kind of opposing Mars. Mercury is coming into the opposition with Mars. So, yeah, that just. There could be kind of a push and pull between self and others. So, some slight disagreements or having to compromise with other people toward like September 19th and 20th. The exact opposition doesn't happen until the 23rd, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but it's just a slight aspect, and it could be good too. There could be a healthy push and pull, since Mercury is generally about connecting with other people anyway, and then Mars is more self-oriented, so there's a push and pull or a having to do a compromise with other people in general, so having social situations that resemble that in a way, if that makes sense. Um, okay, and then the main thing coming up is my calendar is totally off this month. And either it's that or this chart, but according to this chart, the first day of Libra and the first day of fall, also known as the equinox, happens on September 23rd. And okay, my calendar's just way off. You've also got a quarter moon happening right after that, a first quarter moon. So the equinox is called the equinox because it's equim, which means equal, and then nox, which means night. So equal night. So there's 12 hours wherever you are in the world on September 23rd. There's 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. And of course, like if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's the spring equinox, and if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's the fall equinox or autumnal equinox. But you have this like balancing throughout the world, where it's one of only 2 days in the world where we all experience the same amount of day and night. So it's kind of like a reset point, and it's one of the four main angles, the four main times of the year that the two equinoxes and the two solstices, which are kind of reset points, or they're times of abundant energy where if you're into like witchcraft, you can use those for different practices, or if you're into people who do demonic worship, which I don't support, but they do rituals on these days because they know that they're times where of abundance of energy where you can connect to other dimensions or other energies, other frequencies, where you can bring frequencies into this world. Yeah, because it's a time of initiation, sort of. There, all these 4 points are the very beginnings of the 4 seasons. So you're bringing something new into this world, new energies, new themes. So really, between the new moon happening a week before that, and then with the equinox happening, those are both good times to plan things. In general, it's a pattern I'm noticing for these couple weeks, from September 13th through the 23rd, or maybe 25th or so. So from Sunday to the 13th, this is just rough. It's just like a general, really just the middle of September or the end of September, just generally, because these things aren't like clear cut. But from around the 13th to around the 25th or so, it's a good time for strategizing and planning and, thinking of new things. Yeah, because there's several aspects which are about beginning things or thinking about the future or planning things. So it's a good time for manifestation, for thinking about what you want, imagining what you want, meditating on that and bringing it into the world. Yeah, any equinox is good for that. You have the beginning of Libra, which uh, it's a very social season, so very fashionable season, very intellectual season. There's a lot going on because there's so much change that happens through the whole season. The focus becomes more on relationships, social relationships, business relationships. It becomes more external. So, like in general, this is very, very general, but spring is more about the individual. It's about the individual coming into the world, about new birth, new growth. Summer is more about family or the continuation of that growth that happened before. So the strengthening of the individual, and that which branches out, the consciousness of the individual, which branches out into the family or into creation. And then at fall, it branches out further into social relationships, romantic relationships, sexual relationships, business relationships, just friendships, stuff like that. It could also be very intellectual. Libra is a very versatile sign, like I said, so it does have to do with a lot with relationships, but it's also intellectual, so it could have to do with being reflective, um, thinking about the future or the past, either planning things or just reflecting on the past. Thinking it's also a very pleasure seeking sign, so and a lot of times that's social, but it could also be through physical experiences or physical goods. Um, Libra likes nice things, so that's kind of where the general focus is on for fall, especially the first time of fall, if that makes sense. And in general, it depends on where you are, but this is one of the most beautiful times of year because there's a Venus influence there. So Taurus and Libra, or in other words, late April and most of May is one of the most beautiful times, in addition to late September, most of October. Because you've got the middle of spring is beautiful. There's so much, a lot of trees are blossoming and stuff like that. And then you've got the beginning of fall where everything starts to die, but that's kind of beautiful in a way at the beginning. Um, yeah, so I don't know if that makes any sense, but got the beginning of Libra, Mercury square Saturn. My dates are all messed up. I'm just gonna continue on anyway, though. Mercury square Saturn at 25 degrees of, yeah. So it's just the Libra Capricorn squares are interesting because again, it's at first glance they seem like really different energies because Capricorn is very serious. It's very more introverted or more focused, where Libra is more kind of scattered and more about other people. Um, Capricorn's more focused on self. Libra's more focused on other people. So they're just different vibes if you know people with heavy Capricorn or heavy Libra placements. But if you look further, there actually is a connection where Saturn is in domicile in Capricorn and its exaltation is Libra. So there is a Saturn influence there. So it is about being serious, being kind of dry, being objective, and planning for the future, being strategic with your social connections, stuff like that. So Mercury and Libra's got us thinking about those things on September 23rd. And there is a T square because Mars is at 26 degrees Aries. So you got Mercury opposing Mars, squaring Saturn. So there could be this friction regarding our own wants and desires and making those fit with our reality, making plans, strategizing around our ideas and our wants, and strategizing with other people, or just communicating with other people in general. That could be kind of tense on September 23rd. It could be hard to make a compromise because there's this clash between people, or between worldviews, or between ideas. Between I think it has to do with ideas about what kind of future people should have, because everyone's kind of wanting to manifest their own different thing and this is all more small picture. There isn't a lot of super big stuff happening in September, but just on the small term scale, people are sort of manifesting different things, bringing different ideas or frequencies into the world, but they kind of clash on September 23rd. So there's this kind of question of, who does my future or my goals, what people in my life do my goals align with, or or do they not align? Can there be a compromise, or how can we work together, or are we like working against each other? Stuff like that. Figuring those situations out around September 23rd. And again, like I said, anything with Mercury is very quick. The square between Mars and Saturn is much more long term, and it applies to most of this month. So there's that. It's just more of an individual, like bringing Mercury and Libra into this makes it more social, more about other people, and that just applies to September 23rd. But the Mars Saturn square, which applies to the whole month, is more just about the individual, or the individual clashing with like society, or with rules or regulations, or with the world. Not so much this social dynamic that just applies to September 23rd, give or take a day. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, because I'm going to go on. September 24th, you've got Moon entering this very challenging area, which it does every month, but yeah, it gets kind of beaten up in Capricorn because it's in detriment there. And then crossing over Jupiter is nice, but then crossing over the Pluto and Saturn are more difficult for the Moon. Saturn's in domicile, so it can support the Moon in a way, but it's just so different from the Moon that it's at best, it's just a time to be realistic and grounded in your emotions. It's not like a really fun time. September 24th and 25th, yeah, at best, you're just kind of being grounded and being realistic. It's not a super fun time. And the more worse sides of it could be emotionally discomforting, or feeling unloved, or feeling not supported on an emotional level, or feeling alone, or something like that. It could be a depressing, or just boring, or stressful aspect. But yeah, again, the way to utilize it is to be realistic and to be a little bit more stoic just for these couple days. More pragmatic and willing to maybe put your emotions to the side a little bit just in order to be realistic and to do what's best for you ultimately in the long term. Because that's what it's about. The moon wants whatever you're feeling emotionally just on that minute to minute scale, but in Capricorn, it's really not about that. It's about the long term, So maybe not what you want, but what you need. And again, that's September 24th, 25th. You got the exact Mercury Mars square, which I kind of talked about that already, but that social clashing. Which could be good too. I mean, these tense aspects can be fun in a way. It's just more gritty, like I said. So you could have some like fun, like it could be a good time for like debating or something, or having like a sarcastic humor between people, or like grittiness, if that makes sense. Maybe like a healthy clashing of ideas where you could debate about something. That's the more positive side to it. The more negative side would be just flat out disagreeing with people, or getting into little confrontations and stuff like that. It's just that kind of energy on the 25th. It could be very easy to talk to people, but yeah, so might sound like I'm contradicting myself, but September 25th, it might be very easy to initiate conversations, very easy to get into whether it just be conversations or like full on social relationships and situations, but inevitably they result in these sort of disagreements or these tense conversations, And again, just to reiterate, the positive side of that would be maybe a dry, sarcastic, edgy humor with people, or just a healthy debating of different ideas, different perspectives. And again, this is very brief because Mercury's flying through. Mercury's almost in Scorpio. Let's see. Okay, just making sure I covered everything. Got Venus conjuncts Pluto, which again is not a super big deal, and it's kind of a yod with the North Node, but the North Node is not really a planet, so it's okay, let me explain myself here. Yeah, okay, maybe I should just stop mentioning the quincunxes because they're not. I just don't. It's not aspecting anything else. It's kind of aspecting Mars a little bit. Venus and Mars are beginning to trine. That's the main thing I see. So I'll talk about that later once it goes exact. But starting on September 26th, there's this harmony, sexual or romantic harmony, or it could just be chatting between opposite sexes or whatever sex you're attracted to. Yeah, Venus and Mars together is very sexual, very passionate, very could be loving, but also flirtatious or just having fun. It's very much about desire. So a lot of times that is sexual, but it could be other things. Whatever you desire could have to do with that. Um, yeah, it does help out socially too in general. Because people are more generally desiring each other, so people are just more sociable, especially in the fire signs because there's a lot of energy there. Even though Mars is retrograde, it's still in fire signs, and they're both pretty strong placements. Mars is in detriment, or Mars is in domicile in Aries, and Venus is pretty strong in Leo. So people are just naturally more fiery with each other, more playful, more attractive, and attracted to each other. Yeah, and this starts on September 26th, but it peaks on September 27th, 28th. And then continues for a couple days after that. Okay, and then you got Mercury going into Scorpio, which I actually really like. Mercury's technically not in domicile or exaltation in Scorpio, and generally in Western astrology, Mercury's thought to have a really hard time in water signs, especially Pisces, but in general in water signs. But in Chinese astrology, Mercury actually rules water, and there is a connection between Mercury and water because Mercury's about information and learning and knowledge does eventually lead to wisdom generally, so that it becomes more of a water thing after that. So the way I think of it is like, while Mercury, or when I say Mercury, that Mercury represents the mind. So while the mind is generally interested in earth and air things, or in other words, while the mind is generally just interested in like learning tidbits of information, or learning about people, or learning about these more shallow ideas and tidbits and stuff like that, or engaging in activities which just give you like little dopamine rushes, because the logical mind has a very short attention span. It wants whatever's new, whatever's flashy, whatever's just interesting in the moment. But if you follow that and deepen it and evolve it, what the mind or Mercury really wants eventually is to grow and to learn. And once you start learning these smaller, more shallow concepts, you can work up to bigger concepts, and trivia becomes information, which becomes knowledge, which becomes wisdom, which becomes soulfulness. So I think although you start out on this sort of mental scattered energy, which is more about either physical things like statistics, or it's about social interactions, eventually, whatever mental route you take, whatever interests you, whatever you learn about, that could lead to spiritual development and soulfulness. So anyway, that's kind of a long way of saying that there is a connection between Mercury, or the mind, and water, which rules emotion and soul and intuition and spirituality, stuff like that. So Mercury has a lot of fun in Scorpio, and Mercury has a lot of fun in both the Mars ruled signs, because Mercury. Okay, so how do I say this? So the mind ruled by Mercury wants to be edgy and strong, and to go out and get whatever it desires, like the Mars energy does. So when it's in a Mars ruled sign, it generally has a lot of fun there. So what that means is, while Mercury's in Scorpio, people's mentalities will be very engaged. Generally, it's a very engaging time. So depending on where you are, we're in the beginning of fall still. So as it gets colder, there is a connection between it getting colder and people becoming more romantic and more sexual. And that kind of makes sense when you think about Libra and Scorpio and even Sagittarius. All of fall, there's that interest in other people, and a lot of it is about desire in different ways. So Mercury and Scorpio it's this it's this fun time in terms of our mentality, because Scorpio is a good sign for combining physical awareness with like emotional or intuitive awareness. So Mercury, the mind is very engaged. It has a lot to deal with, not only physically and socially, but like intuitively and emotionally as well. So it's this combination of all these different arenas of mentality. And Scorpio is very quick. It's very defensive. It's very instinctive. So Mercury has a really fun time there. Even though it's not at home there, it's not typically what Mercury represents. Just the general mentality is very engaged in that area. And again, it depends on what your astrology is, how that would affect you. But in general, people's minds are very engaged. They're very much about desire, or just it could be a whole range of things that, like I just said. But yeah, so I really like Mercury and Scorpio, and it'll stay there for the rest of September. What else? Okay, you got Venus. Venus is in the middle of quincunxing the three planets in Capricorn. Venus is opposing the moon. I don't really cover lunar aspects because they're just so quick. They're not of that much substance. They'd only affect you on like a matter of minutes or hours. So I don't really cover those. Oh, Saturn's gonna turn direct though. You got Venus trine Mars, which I talked about a little bit. That becomes exact coming up. Yeah, Mars or Venus is cruising. It actually skips over. Let's see. So I guess late September 28th, or give or take a day, depending on where you are. Venus makes the exact trine with Mars, which again, as I said before, it's very romantic, passionate, sexual, social, very much about desire, very much about having nice things, or experiencing pleasure, or having positive experiences. And it's very individualistic. So people are more confident, more outgoing, more, doing whatever to pursue what each individual desires, if that makes sense. So that's a really fun aspect. You've also got Saturn going direct, Mars squaring Saturn becomes exact, even though they've both been going so slow that we'll feel this at least a couple of weeks before September 28th, but it becomes exact around September 28th, 29th. Yeah, so that could have to do with the government since Saturn's involved, or society. So there's this friction there. There could be friction in military situations around the world, or protests maybe. Again, that those wounds of selves clashing with authorities. So just various dysfunctional situations with authorities, large and small. The clashing between the individual and the authority, if that makes sense. I'm still waiting for Saturn to go direct. There we go. So by September 29th, Saturn will be direct. Yeah, so one by one, these outer planets go direct. So that's where I say by October, there will be more stuff beginning to happen in the world. Because although Jupiter and Saturn are direct, when planets first go direct, they're stationary direct, which means that they're not really moving. So they become more intensified, and they're pretty much at a standstill. So that's why I say there's not as much going on for September, but by October these planets Pluto will then go direct as well, and all three of them will start moving forward, although at different rates. So that's where you'll start to see more new stuff happening in the world. Yeah, okay, I pretty much covered that. Sun opposed Chiron, which isn't a big deal. Chiron's a small planetoid, a dwarf planet, or a comet, whatever you want to call it. But so that could just ignite people's wounds, people's traumas. Might just be set off by people might feel disenfranchised because Chiron is this kind of weird, tormented figure that's very traumatized. Has to do with our inner wounds. Has to do with empathy and healing our own wounds by helping other people. And the Sun in Libra is in fall, which means the Sun is weak there technically, or it's out of its element. So people do naturally feel disenfranchised. Like people with Suns in Libra or Aquarius are technically, they have a detrimented sun placement, so they do feel kind of at odds with other people or out of place in a way, off kilter. So this aspect, September 29th, you have this people in general might feel disenfranchised or personally hurt or personally like maybe even victimized. And I do feel like it has to do with the protest, just because Chiron in Aries is a very protesting kind of thing where it's demanding retribution for its traumas. That could be one aspect of it, or yeah, it's just very vocal about its own traumas. So that could be set off on September 29th. People more sensitive, more maybe feeling a little bit like their egos have been deflated slightly, and like and people go about reckoning with that in different ways. People could be more sensitive, but they could also be more. I mean, even just the word sensitive has so many different meanings. People could be more sensitive, so they could be more empathetic and tender, but they could also be more, what's the word? More prone to like lashing out, or, more defensive. So it could go kind of either way, but people are more emotionally vulnerable, I would say, on September 29th. Okay, and then that pretty much covers it, I think. There's a full moon coming up. I don't know if that's September 30th or October 1st. Or October 2nd. Looks like October 1st, give or take a day. So I'll just talk about that real quick since I'm already on it, and then I'll finish up. Yeah, okay, so this is one of the more fun full moons because you've got Sun and Moon are both in the Yang sign, so they're both dominant, they're both expressive. Full moons in general are more crazy. People stay up later. There's just more activity in general, so there's more accidents, more people in hospitals usually. Maybe not so much now with what's going on with coronavirus, but in general, there's more people partying more people at bars, so more good stuff happening, more bad stuff happening, things culminating, things coming to a climax. Um, yeah, very social. This is kind of a party energy because both Libra and Aries are very social. They both want to party and have a good time. They both want to meet new people and have social experiences. Yeah, so all that's going on. But then again, everything I just said about Sun opposing Chiron the day before that is still applying to today, or I think that was September 29th, but it's still applying now because Chiron's only 2 degrees away from the full moon. So, okay, so there is that want to party and to have fun and to socialize and stuff, but then there's also these emotional winds that could come up. So, see, and it looks like it's happening on a Thursday, or yeah, on a Thursday. So I mean, maybe not so much actual partying going on, since it's in the middle of the week. That would kind of dilute it a little bit since everyone's working or just not partying, I guess. But yeah, so there's that desire to socialize, to party, but then people are just kind of emotional and their traumas are more at the surface. So there could be a lot of different situations that come out of that. So that's just something to be mindful of, to be, just to be aware of in yourself and other people, just to make room for other people and understand that people might be more sensitive, and maybe you don't need to take it personally. People could just be going through stuff. Everyone's always going through stuff, but it's just more obvious for the full moon on at the very beginning of October. Yeah, it's about compromise. Combining Libra and Aries is always about just having a compromise, kind of. Okay, and that pretty much concludes it. I already went past the end of September. Venus goes into Virgo on the 2nd, so Mercury and Venus are creating this whole month, and going into October it gets a little bit more introverted or serious because you've got Mercury in Scorpio and Venus in Virgo, so it's more strategic, more introverted. Yeah, but I won't go into that. So hopefully that was interesting. That's pretty much what I see. I don't usually go through every little aspect like that, but there's so many little aspects this month that you could pretty much talk nonstop through the whole month, like I just did, and always have another thing to talk about. So, but yeah, in general, this month is a little bit quieter. But like I said, with these outer planets, that's the main big thing when I look at this from a more big term, more long term perspective. That's the main thing that I see is toward the end of the month you have these three planets one by one going direct. First Jupiter, then Saturn, and then further in October it'll be Pluto. And again, this is slow, so it'll take a little bit of time for them to get going. But once they start moving forward in October, that's when there's going to be more new stuff happening, more crazy stuff, and especially with the election coming up in America, there's going to be more stuff happening in October and November. So that might be exciting, but just enjoy this relatively peaceful time now in September. There's lots of new stuff happening in our personal lives, so just enjoy that. Enjoy the more personal focus this month. And I will see you later. Sorry, my videos are so, what's the word, like unreliable. I'll either not post for a month or post a whole bunch of videos, but that's what I gotta do. So, okay, see you later.